Fellas, Belal Muhammad and JDM just put on a potential fight of the year contender, and Jack Della MADDALENA hasn't even let Belal Muhammad have a single defense in the welterweight division. He's taken the belt straight off him, and welterweight might actually be my favorite division in the UFC right now. With JDM being the champion, the contenders that we've got, the Makhachev fight that we've got between JDM and Makhachev, I know that means we miss out on the Topuria-Ilya situation, but who gives a shit, man? This is going to be the UFC 315 full card thoughts and breakdown. I thought for a Canada card, for Canada standards, this was a solid pay-per-view. The main event is definitely cheered me up, and we'll go in there with the first fight on the card, Brad Katona versus Bekzat Almakhan. Bekzat Almakhan, just as I predicted, knocks out Brad Katona in the first round. Yeah, this is very good by Bekzat Almakhan. It was almost a matter of when, not if, he's going to knock out Brad Katona. He kept going in with blitzes and tagging Brad Katona. Katona wasn't able to stop him until eventually just goes in with an uppercut and near the flatlines Brad Katona, knocks him out cold. And I'm bought on the hype of Bekzat Almakhan. I mean, a lot of people were bought on the hype after that fight with Aiemann and Magomedov, and yeah, this guy's going to be legit. I do really think this guy's going to be a top 10 fighter one day. You know, dropped Aiemann and Magomedov in his UFC debut, was able to survive 3 rounds with him on short notice, just knocked out Brad Katona like it's nothing. We just saw Gene Matsumoto, who went to a close fight with Rob Font, go to a close fight with Katona. So I think Bekzat Almakhan can definitely see this dude hitting the top 10. I think he's maybe 1 or 2 wins away from hitting the top 15. But yeah, Bekzat Almakhan is a legit striker. Quick, precise, powerful. This dude's a scary guy in the bantamweight division. He's got the full package on the feet. I do want to see a bit of grappling from him, but the only grappling we've seen him in is against arguably the best wrestler in this division outside of Marc with Aiemann and Magomedov. But Bekzat looks legit. I think he's got potential to be in the top 10 of this division. And that's kind of just Brad Katona summed up. I said this in the prediction video. He's a very basic fighter. He's high pressure, mixes the boxing with the wrestling, but doesn't really do it when he should. And he's just a bit of a low-level pressure fighter. And I knew that Brad Katona was going to try and engage in a scrap, and he ended up getting clipped by Bekzat Almakhan. And this guy's going to go far in this division. I can really see it happening, man. Top 10, future top 10 fighter is Bekzat Almakhan. Great way to kick off the card. Knocks out Brad Katona. Terrible stop for the Canadian fans, but Bekzat Almakhan gets the KO in the first round, which brings us on to Daniel Santos versus Jeung Lee. Another really good fight for the first 2 rounds. They were just swinging back and forth. After like halfway through the first round, I was almost guaranteed. Well, I almost, was 100% sure that this wasn't going to go the full distance. Somebody was going to get knocked out. But we did start to see Daniel Santos mix it with a takedown to bring the fight to the mat, which the Canadian crowd didn't really appreciate, but I thought it was a smart thing for Daniel Santos. But yeah, this was a banger of a fight. Both guys just standing and trading in the pocket at every single opportunity. You'd have Daniel Santos with his heavyweight ass style attacking Jeung Lee, just slashing his legs and then swinging for the fences, and Jeung Lee would invite him open and just start trading in the pocket. This was a really good fight. It was like watching Charles Oliveira versus Korean Zombie. All these Korean fighters always seem to kind of fight like Korean Zombie. I think the guy's called the Korean Tiger or something like that is Jeung Lee. So they all have a very Korean Zombie-esque style where they're just like swinging for the fences. And then you've got Daniel Santos, who's literally like a clone of Oliveira, comes from the same gym of Shute Box. It is genuine like Charles Oliveira versus TKZ, but yeah, really good fight. Stand up, just throwing it back and forth. I will say Santos played it smart. I actually thought in the build-up to this fight it would be Jeung Lee shooting the takedowns. We saw him in the fight with Garrett Armfield shoot a couple of takedowns, so I was expecting him to maybe shoot a couple of takedowns, but it was Daniel Santos being the guy initiating the takedowns. He mixed in the grappling perfectly, and that's what won him the fight. He got the control time. He was stolen a little bit. He didn't really do any damage with the ground and pound. Didn't really seem to be looking for any submissions, and it kind of pissed me off in the last 10 seconds where he was running away, but it wasn't short notice for him. It was upper weight class, so you can't really be mad at that for Daniel Santos. But I thought it was a good fight, good win for Daniel Santos, and I assume he's going to be staying at the featherweight division now. And like I said, I know this was on short notice, but I assume he's going to stay at this weight class. And even though Jeung Lee lost, I don't think his stock necessarily went down from this performance. It was a fun fight. He wasn't too far off winning, so it is what it is. But good way to start off the card again. Then we had Marc-Andre Barriault versus Bruno Silva. Yeah, I kind of knew after Bruno Silva's fight with Nordiev that he probably isn't going to be a guy that I ever pick to win a fight ever again. And Marc-Andre Barriault got a brutal knockout over Bruno Silva, where we keep having updates throughout the commentary or throughout the event of the state of Bruno Silva, because he went out on a stretcher from how badly Marc-Andre Barriault KO'd him. He gets him up against the cage in the clinch and just starts firing down elbows against Bruno Silva and just completely slumps him out cold. Out cold, flatlines him, and he has to be taken out on a stretcher. Since when did Marc-Andre Barriault be the guy taking people out on stretchers? I kind of find it ironic that Bruno Silva goes 3 rounds with middleweight Alex Alex Pereira. He goes 3 rounds without ever getting wobbled, but then you fight Marc-Andre Barriault, a guy on a 3-fight losing streak who's a fight away from being cut from the UFC, and you get brutally KO'd and put on a stretcher. That's just MMA for you, but yeah, Barriault saves his career. If he would have lost this fight, he would have been cut from the UFC, and that was the case in this fight. And obviously, Bruno Silva, listen, I'm sure the UFC are going to... Well, I don't know how the UFC are going to be treating him now, but I'm sure he's probably not going to be getting another contract with the UFC. That's probably him done, and for good reason, to be fair. He's on a big losing streak. He's looked terrible in all his fights, and Marc-Andre Barriault's just saved his career. Whenever you have a Canada card, you stick him on the card, and he was a great KO for Marc-Andre Barriault. But he's just a hit or miss fighter. You know, in performances like this, you look at Marc-Andre Barriault and you're like, this dude's actually good. You know, he might be one of the better unranked middleweights. And then you see him face somebody else, you know, like a Joe Pyfer or a Chris Curtis or a Dustin Stoltzfus or an Anthony Hernandez, and he just looks terrible. So he's kind of like a hit or miss fighter, kind of like Alex Morono in the welterweight division. Sometimes you look at Marc-Andre Barriault, he looks amazing, he's having these great performances, and then sometimes he's a victim of a highlight reel. But he gets the win in Canada. The Canadians were cheering him on. It was a pretty good moment for Marc-Andre Barriault, probably the best career highlight of his so far. Knocking out Bruno Silva out cold, cutting him from the organization, saving his contract in Canada. Good win for Marc-Andre Barriault. And yeah, he's probably going to get a bonus for that as well. There's quite a few good finishes on this card, but I think because of the fact that the crowd was so behind him, the fact that he slumped Bruno Silva out cold that bad, I can see him getting a bonus in this fight. So good win for Marc-Andre Barriault. Then we had Navajo Sterling versus Ivan Erslan. This was where the card kind of started to take a little bit of a turn as we progressed onto the prelims. Then the card started to kind of, I guess, slow down a bit. When Navajo Sterling wins a decision, it was just kind of like it was a competitive kickboxing match for like the first the first 13 and a half minutes. Nothing really went down. It was kind of just Navajo Sterling doing the better until the last minute of the fight. This is where chaos erupts, where Navajo Sterling wobbles Ivan Erslan, goes for the finish, kind of fumbles to finish. He gets gassed out whilst trying to finish him, so he ends up fumbling it, but obviously that ended up winning them the fight. And Ivan Erslan as well was wobbled and kind of inviting him to come in and trade in the pocket. But it was quite an uneventful fight until the last minute when Sterling hurts Erslan badly and they're both swinging. But man, I'm sick of seeing these fighters come so close to a finish and then just fumble it. We had it with Carlos Prates 2 weeks ago. We had it with Navajo Sterling. If this guy would have just got a bit harder on the ground and pound, I think he could have got a finish. And even with Aldo, which we're going to talk about later on, the dude's got the finishing ability of Movs or Evloev. It was a decent win for Sterling. He was a favourite coming into this fight. Ivan Erslan's never won a fight in the UFC, so I do think he's a little bit overrated and was a little bit overrated because everyone was hyping him up as this city kickboxing prodigy. The next big thing from city kickboxing is going to decisions with Tuco Tacos and Ivan Erslan, which is never a good look, but he gets the job done. He's a pretty solid kickboxer. Ivan Erslan did good kind of landing the overhand rights at times, and, you know, he was inviting him. I would like to see him, you know, stay in the UFC. I know he's 0-2 in the promotion now, but he's tough. He seems to be, I guess, quite kind of fun, you know, inviting it on, swinging for the fences, but I'm not sure what the UFC are going to do with Ivan Erslan. But for Navajo Sterling, decent win. 2-0 in the UFC. It's the experience at the end of the day. I think he's only had like 7 professional fights, so hopefully he can improve, but I thought it was quite an uneventful fight with a good last minute where I was hoping that the Navajo Sterling was going to get a finish, but he didn't. And then we had another light heavyweight fight that I guess was again kind of low output. The light heavyweights didn't really deliver, and again, this is where the controversial scorecards kind of started to erupt in this card, where Modestas Bukauskas wins a split decision over Ian Cutelaba. Again, it was kind of just a very similar fight where they were both circling each other. Ian Cutelaba would shoot like a spinning back kick, or no, yeah, like a spinning wheel kick, and he'd swing for the fences with like a massive overhand right, and then Modestas Bukauskas would go in with a 1-2, and then in between that, it was just them two taking turns holding each other against the cage to get their energy back. There wasn't really anything significant to talk about in this fight. Apart from that, it was just spinning wheel kicks, 1-2s from Modestas Bukauskas, and hold it against the cage. And they just both see very gunshine there, which I don't really expect. We've just had Ian Cutelaba go out there and finish Ibo Aslan. We just had Modestas Bukauskas go out there and knock out Rafael Sequeira. So I was expecting this to be one of the fights on the card that you can almost guarantee it's not going to go the distance, but they both just seemed very gun-shy. And apart from, like I said, Modestas Bukauskas trying to shoot him with a 1-2, which he's definitely learned from Aspinall, and Ian Cutelaba with the spinning attacks every couple of seconds. There wasn't really much to talk about in this fight. And then it gets us on to the decision. Now, I did pick Modestas Bukauskas to win this fight, and I don't think it's the fact that Modestas Bukauskas won that people are mad about. I think it's the fact that one of the judges give the scorecard 30-27 to Modestas Bukauskas. Now, I'm going to be honest, I did miss like halfway through the first round, but from what I'm hearing from commentary, it was definitely Ian Cutelaba's first round. I thought the second round could have gone to Ian Cutelaba as well. well. So it was a controversial decision. I don't think it should have been 30-27 to Modestas Bukauskas. The Canada judges were kind of showing themselves up. Listen, Modestas Bukauskas, he's in the light heavyweight division, which is quite shallow. He's on a 3-fight winning streak. They're probably going to give him somebody in the top 15, but I think if he wants to progress in the rankings, the guy's going to have to improve. He's way too hesitant. He's way too gun-shy. And I feel like he's got the skills. You know, he's training at Aspinall's gym. He's got the fundamentals on the feet. His grappling hasn't really been a problem in his UFC career so far. He's got power, clearly, but I just think the guy's way too gun-shy. You know, we got knocked out by Vito Petrino a few years ago, and now he's too scared to engage. And for Ian Cutelaba, I guess it sucks. You know, he was also on a bit of a winning streak and he could have won this fight, but it is what it is. And to be fair to Ian Cutelaba, the guy was borderline going to get cut from the UFC about 2 years ago, so he has kind of made a bit of a resurgence. But the fight itself, they were both quite gun-shy. They had their moments, nothing significant. Modestas Bukauskas wins, a kind of controversial decision. And then we had Jasmine Jasudavicious go out there and start to pick up the pace, start to bring some life into this Canada card again as she submits Jessica Andrade in the first round and does it flawlessly. She lands the bigger shot on the feet, lands a nice 1-2 down the pipe, and immediately after that goes for a takedown, slams Jessica Andrade, and within a minute, she's managed to submit Jessica Andrade with a rear naked choke. And what are they feeding these Canadian women? Because Canadian women, I feel like, in the men's, you kind of got the whole Dagestani men, kind of like the boogeyman of the men's divisions. When it comes to women, it seems to be Canadians. You've just had last week Jillian Robertson, who seems like she's going to go far with her grappling in the strawweight division. And now in the flyweight division, you've got Jasmine Jasudavicious, another Canadian woman who's dominating with the grappling. It seems like these Canadian women are carrying Canada on their backs. But it was a flawless performance from Jasmine Jasudavicious. She made it look completely easy. Every single time she wanted to take, well, she goes in there, lands a 1-2, clips Jessica Andrade, slams her, gets the submission, and she did that to Jessica Andrade. She's not just doing this as, you know, some random unranked fighter. Andrade's a veteran. She's been in there with tough fighters before. It's not easy to get her finished out there. So for Jasmine Jasudavicious to do that so flawlessly, it's a statement-making win, and she now needs to be thrown in the title picture. I still can't get my head around the fact that Jasmine Jasudavicious a couple of years ago lost to Tracy Cortez, of all fighters, an Instagram model who fights once every year and a half. You lost to Tracy Cortez, of all fighters, but she's managed to make a bit of a career resurgence. I think she's on like a 5 or 6 fight winning streak now. Couple of finishes in there. Honestly, would it be mad if you put her in a number 1 contender fight? I think Jasmine Jasudavicious is at that point now where she's about a win away from a title fight. So I think you put her in a number 1 contender fight, potentially like an Apex co-main event. I was going to say main event, but we don't need any more women in the main events. But good win for Jasmine Jasudavicious. Makes it look flawless against Jessica Andrade, who's the most inconsistent fighter in women MMA right now. She's genuinely just a coin flip, and she's now solidified herself as a top contender in the women's flyweight division, and made some noise. And then we had the final prelim, which I'm sure the Canadian fans were grateful for, as Mike Malott goes out there and knocks out Charles Radtke in the second round, kind of brutally as well. Yeah, the Canadian fans hated Charles Radtke because of the build-up that he had. He was sticking the middle fingers up. He was saying that he's going to... What did he say? He said he's going to teach Canada a lesson for booing the anthem of UFC. I'm not sure what he said. But either way, Mike Malott finishes him brutally, drops him with a right hand, and then just unloads with vicious ground and pound and absolutely brutalizes him. That loss to Neil Magny, he's definitely going to stay in the record of Mike Malott. But outside of that one loss to Neil Magny, this guy's looked amazing in the UFC. Apart from his last fight against Trevin Giles, he's finished every single opponent in the UFC. I think he's like 6 or 7-1 in the organization with 6 finishes. I think maybe even like a top 15 opportunity could be next. I know he lost to Magny, but he's now put together a 2-fight winning streak. That was it kind of reminded me of Adrian Yanez and Tony Kelly, where Tony Kelly was disrespecting the crowd. He hated the fan favorite in Adrian Yanez, and he gets brutally knocked out. And that was kind of the same for this fight with Charles Radtke against Mike Malott, where he hated the ground and again got finished. But it was a great win by Mike Malott. Brutal finish, and it's going to do wonders for his confidence now. He's back on a 2-fight winning streak. He's just won in front of Canada. He's a good grappler. His striking's improved massively. The only question with Mike Malott is his gas tank, because that was the issue in the Neil Magny fight, but I'm assuming that he's improved it, and he's a welterweight prospect, man. You can say he got fraud checked a couple of years ago, but he is a bit of a welterweight prospect. The guy brought it home for Canada. Great night for Canadians so far. And for Charles Radtke, it's going to be hard to kind of recover from this. To be a massive heel in Canada and then get brutally finished in that way by Mike Malott. You didn't just lose the decision or, you know, get an early stoppage. You got fucking knocked out. You got knocked the fuck out. He bullied you with ground and pound, man. It was like watching Hendo versus Bisping. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. Good win for Mike Malott. Brutalizes Charles Radtke, back on a winning streak. And, yeah, I'm sure there's some big fights from in the welterweight division. And then we got into the main card with Benoit St. Denis against Kyle Prepolec. I mean, Benoit St. Denis gets the submission in the second round. The first round was kind of nothing really happened. Benoit saying that he's took him down, threatened a couple of submissions, and that was it. But in the second round, he started to get going. He started absolutely slashing Prepolec open with elbows. To be fair to Prepolec, he didn't get knocked out or wobbled by any of the shots, to be fair, but eventually the inevitable happened. Benoit saying that he's took him down, got the submission of a Karl Prepolec, and submitted him, which he needed to do. If he didn't finish Karl Prepolec in this fight, this would have done terrible things for his stock. And to be fair, even though we got the win, and I'm not just going to shit on BSD, I think if Yoel Alvarez would have shown up in this fight, it would have been a completely different story. I reckon we would have seen BSD got finished in this. Just based on how he looked in the first round against Karl Prepolec, it took way too long to kind of get going in this fight. I think if you would have chucked him in there with Yoel Alvarez, I'm confident that Yoel Alvarez would have got the job done, but that didn't happen. Benoit saying that he's dominated Prepolec, which was always going to happen. He was a crash dummy. And there's not really much to talk about from this fight. I mean, there's not really anything we can learn. Prepolec, you know, the guy's 0-3 in the UFC, comes in on a week's notice off the streets to face Benoit Saint Denis. I mean, good win for Benoit Saint Denis, I guess. He called out Gamrot. Gamrot's booked against Ludovic Klein, and I think for BSD, give him somebody similar to Yoel Alvarez. Give him like a Grant Dawson or some other dude unranked at 155 that actually means something. I feel like this fight doesn't really do anything crazy for Benoit Saint Denis' career. It gives him a bit of a paycheck. It gets him another finish. It gets him another highlight reel. But apart from that, it doesn't really decrease or increase his stock. But Prepolec's tough. Survived a couple of elbows from Benoit Saint Denis, did as good as he could. Maybe the UFC going to reward him for stepping up on short notice and they're going to give him another fight. I don't think they will. I mean, they did it to Val Woodburn, you never know, but Benoit Saint Denis gets to finish in the first round. Did as I expected, not overly impressed, not necessarily disappointed. It's just, it is what it is. He did what we expected to happen. If he wouldn't have gone out there and finished Prepolec, then that would have been, you know, terrible for his career. Anyway, next fight we had Alexa Grasso versus Natalia Silva. I said this in the build-up, man. Natalia Silva might have some of the best striking in the women's flyweight division, and she just completely styles on Alexa Grasso the entire fight. She was just piecing her up with a taekwondo. She was on the back foot. Alexa Grasso was trying to close the distance, and it was just kind of pick and move, picking apart Alexa Grasso, then getting out the way of anything. And to be fair to Alexa Grasso, she did try and close the distance. She tried mixing it up with the grappling. She tried landing the big shots with the boxing, but it was just Natalia Silva dominating with the striking the entire fight, and she's probably earned herself a title fight with that performance against Valentina Shevchenko. But I think you've got to give Natalia Silva a title fight. I think she's on a 13-fight win streak, undefeated in the UFC, just beat #1 former champion Alexa Grasso. She might actually be the best striker in this division. Her and Shevchenko, I know Shevchenko's going to mix it with the grappling, and Natalia Silva is still kind of untested with the grappling, but if that fight stays standing, that might be one of the best striking fights we've seen in the women's flyweight division for a long time, because Natalia Silva, he's probably up there with the top 2, top 3 best kickboxers in this division right now. She just picked apart Alexa Grasso for 15 minutes straight. Even in that Shevchenko versus Grasso fight the second time around, Grasso was able to drop Shevchenko, so great performance by Natalia Silva, earned herself a title fight. And to be fair to Alexa Grasso, tried everything to close the distance. She tried everything to get the win. She tried everything to give herself the best opportunity, but Silva used her footwork to advantage. Again, just sticking and moving. Nothing Alexa Grasso could really do, and we've got a new top contender in the women's strawweight, I keep saying strawweight, women's flyweight division with Natalia Silva. Give her a title fight against Shevchenko in a co-main event later this year. That's your fight done. Great performance by Natalia Silva. And then we had, I've got mixed opinions on this fight because I really like the fight itself, but there's a couple of things that I do have a bit of a problem with. Anyway, Aiemann Zahabi wins a decision. Now, the decision itself was, again, very controversial, but I'll talk about that in a second. But the fight itself was really competitive. I thought Aldo was winning the first 2 rounds. He looked quick as well for his age. How old is he now? Like 38 years old? He looked rapid in there, this Jose Aldo. He looked amazing. But Aiemann Zahabi was still in the fight. It wasn't like Jonathan Martinez where he got battered, but that 3rd round might go down as round of the year for 2025. Aldo is genuinely a second away from finishing Aiemann Zahabi. I thought he was going to get the finish, and then within 30 seconds, he's on his back, taking a beating from Aiemann Zahabi because he's completely gassed himself out trying to get the finish. But yeah, that round 3 was crazy. It could go down as round of the year. Both of them nearly got finished, and it was a good, kind of comeback from Aiemann Zahabi to nearly get finished by Aldo, which I was frustrated by. Imagine fucking Aldo got the finish in that fight. But yeah, close stand-up fight throughout. Aldo still making it competitive, but the sad thing is, I mean, first of all, the judges' scorecard, we'll get onto that. I thought Aldo won the fight. I didn't necessarily think it was a terrible robbery that Aiemann Zahabi won. I sided round 1, round 2, Jose Aldo. Round 3, definitely gave that one to Aiemann Zahabi. You can't argue 10-8 either because Aldo dropped him and nearly finished him too. So it wasn't a 10-8. It was, I thought he should have been 30-20, and what was it, 29-28 to Jose Aldo, but the judges gave it to Aiemann Zahabi, which is already quite controversial, but Aldo retired, man. I think, listen, it's sad to retire. They didn't give him like a ceremony or anything, and then I can understand why they didn't give him a ceremony, because Aldo didn't really tell them that he was going to retire. I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, they're going to give Anthony Smith a send-off, but not Jose Aldo, where Anthony Smith's entire fight was built up on him retiring. Aldo hasn't alerted us that he's going to retire, and he's retired before and come out of retirement anyway, but for his last fight to be an arguably a robbery against Aiemann Zahabi in not enemy territory, but not in front of a home crowd, I think the perfect retirement would have been that Jonathan Martinez fight. But either way, Aldo's had a great career, one of the greatest of all time. He's probably not going to come back. I can see him having a couple of boxing matches, but good win for Aiemann Zahabi, I guess. Gets to win over a legend in Jose Aldo, and I think this kind of does raise the stock of Aiemann Zahabi. You can call it a robbery, but look at what Aldo did to Mario Batista and Jonathan Martinez, and look at what Aiemann Zahabi did to Aldo. He didn't have to hold him against the cage. He didn't take a beating from him for 15 minutes. He went out there and made it competitive and nearly finished him in that third round, so it was a good performance from Aiemann Zahabi. I think he's going to stay in the top 15 for quite some time, although it surprised me when I heard that he's like 37. I think he's only a year younger than Jose Aldo as well, which is crazy. Because every single time we talk about Aldo, we talk about him as if he's this old veteran. But good win for Aiemann Zahabi. It's a bit sad to see Aldo go out this way, and I hope he just kind of get one of those ceremonies next week for his retirement or whenever the next big card is. He's already been inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he has officially retired. So enjoy retirement, bro. One of the greatest of all time. Top 5, top 10, whatever. But the fight itself, I thoroughly enjoyed. Thought it was competitive, and that third round could go down as round of the year for 2025. And then we had the co-main event. Now, I did kind of fall asleep in the fourth round of this fight because I'm in the UK. I'm watching this at 5 a.m. and it's hard to kind of convince myself to stay awake for 25 minutes of women MMA. But Valentina Shevchenko gets the decision win against Manon Fiorot. She just outstrikes it off the bat in the first round. Shevchenko was setting the pace. You know, Fiorot was trying to, just high pressure. Put on a high pressure kind of attack on Valentina Shevchenko, trying to get in her face, and then Shevchenko just keeps popping her with jabs, cuts her open. I think she broke her nose in the first round, setting the pace for the fight. And then for the rest of the fight, Manon Fiorot did well. She was actually the one initiating the grappling, which I didn't expect. And then in the fourth round, Valentina Shevchenko drops Manon Fiorot, which probably won Shevchenko the fight. But it was a competitive fight. I think it rose both of their stocks. Very close competitive fight. But yeah, Fiorot impressed me in this fight. I thought if anybody was going to win by grappling, it would have been Valentina Shevchenko, and it was seeming that way after the first round. But Manon Fiorot was the one shooting the takedown. She obviously has worked on her grappling too, and the wrestling. But I just don't really see Shevchenko losing anytime soon. I know she's getting up there in age, and she only lost a couple of years ago to Alexa Grasso, and I know she's obviously on the later half of her career. But which contenders in this division are actually going to beat Valentina Shevchenko? I think Natalia Silva's definitely got a good chance of beating her on the feet, but Natalia Silva's never been tested when it comes to grappling, which we're definitely going to see against Valentina Shevchenko. And apart from that, who else have you got? Rose Namajunas gets her ass whooped by Valentina Shevchenko. Erin Blackfield gets her ass whooped by Valentina Shevchenko. We might have to be talking about Zhang Weili moving up from the strawweight division for a women's title, for a double champ opportunity against Valentina Shevchenko. I think you're giving Natalia Silva the title shot, and then Zhang Weili versus Valentina Shevchenko. Why the fuck not? But great win by Valentina Shevchenko. She's not washed. She's still got it. She gets to win over Manon Fiorot, who I think will be a top contender in this division. I can see Manon Fiorot fighting and potentially becoming a future champion in this division when Valentina Shevchenko's gone, because she is very well rounded. She made it close with Shevchenko. Definitely made it a lot closer than the Grasso performance. So good win for Valentina Shevchenko. Gets the job done and still. And then we had the main event. I haven't been this happy in a long time. Listen, I understand we might have just lost the fight with Ilia Topuria and Islam Makhachev, which is a conversation for another day, but Belal Muhammad, I thought this guy was going to terrorize the welterweight division for a couple of years. And listen, I know Belal Muhammad's overhated. When I kind of take the piss out of Belal Muhammad, I know he's kind of overhated. He did look insanely dominant against Leon Edwards, but Jack's the fucking champion, man. Jack Della Maddalena. Belal Muhammad just decides not to shoot a takedown. I think he shot like 3 takedowns the entire fight. Bro, in the fight with Leon Edwards, he shot 3 in the first minute. And you've got JDM just basically outclassing Belal Muhammad on the feet. Now, Belal Muhammad's definitely improved his striking, but the champion has a name, and his name is Jack Della Maddalena. It must be good for Australian fans. In the last 2 pay-per-view cards, you've got Volkanovski becoming a champion and now JDM. You've got to do a pay-per-view in Perth later this year. Maddalena versus Makhachev, Volkanovski versus Evloev, Russia versus Australia Part 2. Fuck, that's a sick pay-per-view card. I haven't even built that yet, but JDM's done it. The Belal era is over. I kind of feel bad for Belal Muhammad now, because he did kind of want to test his strike and he didn't want to have a boring fight. And to be fair, that was an amazing fight. I think that could honestly go down as one of the fight of the years for this year. And you already know the UFC are going to try and keep Belal Muhammad as far away from the belt as possible. They're going to make this dude have to go on like another 3-4 fight winning streak before he gets another title fight. So I do kind of feel bad for Belal Muhammad, but it's the JDM era now, man. Maddalena gets it done. Welterweight, I think, is honestly the best division in the UFC, with Makhachev potentially moving up to face JDM, which is probably going to happen in Perth later this year for a pay-per-view main event, with the likes of Ian Gary, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Joaquin Buckley, Sean Brady. I might actually have to put this above 155. This might be my favorite division in the UFC. When Belal Muhammad is in a fight of the year contender, you already know it's a great division. So JDM gets the job done, beats Belal Muhammad in. He could be the guy to beat Islam Makhachev. Look how he just performed against Belal Muhammad, who's obviously a lot bigger than Islam Makhachev, and JDM's obviously going to be a lot bigger than Makhachev too, even though Makhachev's big for 155. I'm not going to make my prediction on that fight already, but I think JDM could be the guy to do it. Imagine in Perth, Australia, JDM gets revenge on Islam Makhachev and beats Islam Makhachev to be, just beats Makhachev. That'll be crazy. That'll be history for Australia. But great win for JDM as the underdog, gets the job done against Belal Muhammad. Doesn't even let him get a single defense. And I think this really raises the question, how bad is Leon Edwards? How bad is Leon Edwards? How he's made Sean Brady and Belal Muhammad both have career best performances to the point where we think they're a lot better than they actually are. But JDM's the champion. It is what it is. I thought UFC 315, listen, it was never going to be card of the year because of how bad it was on paper, but for a Canada card and for the fights that we had, I thought it was pretty good. So let me know your thoughts on UFC 315 and the fact that Jack's a champion. Thank you for watching.